Okay, hi class. This is Mr. Tan, and we are now managing a successful business project. And we are in Scotland, and we are specifically in Alva, and we're at the Alva Glen. The Alva Glen is absolutely beautiful. It's beautiful mountains, and there are waterfalls over here, and the water is fresh drinking water. Absolutely amazing. It's one of the most beautiful places that I like in Scotland. There are many other beautiful places, but this is one of them. So we are looking at managing a successful business project, and we are focusing on question P2. Now, P2 says produce a project management plan that covers aspects of cost, scope, time, quality, communication, risk, and resources. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 things that you need to talk about in relation to your aims and objectives of your business project. Now, if you remember in P1 says complete and devise project aims in terms of what you wanted to achieve, and what you wanted the final outcome to be, and then your objectives, how you're going to reach your aims. Now, the project management plan, obviously you need to complete a plan and a time frame, but you need to cover all the different component parts. So remember, I told you that I had an advertising campaign that I had to do for the company I worked for, which was Metro Products, advertising a mechanical steering wheel product called Stop Lock. And we decided to do an advertising campaign in Nottingham. Now, the advertising campaign in Nottingham, to find out if the marketing department was worthwhile spending £30,000, and if it justified the costs. So we were doing bus back advertising, radio campaigns, newspaper ads, press releases. We were doing in-store material, and we were doing A4 leaflets, A5 posters, display units, and we were doing staff training and visiting the stores. So I'm trying to look at P2 in relation to my example that I'm trying to give you. Now, so what is the cost? So you have to cover cost. Cost is what is associated with the whole campaign, and the component costs of the different objectives. So in my example, the costs are the whole cost of the whole campaign. What was the cost of the bus back campaign? What was the cost of the radio campaign? What was the cost of all the material? What was the cost of the A5 leaflets? What was the cost of the A4 leaflets? What was the cost of the posters? What was the cost of the display units? What were the cost of creating the artwork? So as well as the bus back campaign, we had to print the posters that would go on the bus back campaigns. So what were these costs? So you have to look at all the costs associated with your project, and then you have to look at the scope of your project. So what is the scope? The scope, the documentation of the project scope, explains the boundaries of the project and establishes the responsibilities of the work to be done. So if we're looking at advertising, for instance, the scope of the advertising in terms of the bus back advertising is not advertising all around the country, but it's the bus back advertising in terms of Nottingham. So the scope is saying, well, who are all the stockists in Nottingham that stocks our products, and then how much or how many buses do we want in each area? Well, we said we would take a 15% coverage of all the buses in a specific depot in relation to the stockist that stocked or the retail outlet that stocked our products. So the scope of the bus back campaigns was only in Nottingham in relation to the stores that stocked our products. The scope of the radio campaign was only in Stoke-on-Trent radio campaign. It wasn't in other radio stations, but only in Nottingham. The newspapers that we took and we advertised in were only in the newspapers in Nottingham and not the national newspapers. So again, the scope was only in relation to the marketing campaign area. And for your scope, you need to clearly define the scope of your area that you are undertaking that project in. The time frame, again, the time frame for the whole campaign or the whole project or the whole aim of the project, but also the time frames for each of the different objectives. The time frame of my bus back campaign, of creating the poster, of creating the artwork, and the artwork create the poster, and printing the poster, and then getting the posters to the bus depots, and then the bus depots putting those posters on the back of the buses. The time frame of creating the radio ad, and then getting the radio ad to the radio stations. The time frame of the display units, of the A5 leaflets, of the A4 leaflets, of the posters. The time frame of the doing the presentation to the agents and reps. The time frame of all the objectives, and also the time frame in terms of the whole campaign from start to finish. When is the start date? When is the finish date? The quality. You know, what quality do you want? What is the quality of the bus back campaign, the posters, the message, the radio campaign? What are you trying to achieve? What is your positioning strategy? So the quality in terms of each of the objectives that you want to achieve. What is the quality? Is it a low quality, medium quality, high quality that meets your objectives, and your objectives that meet your ultimate aims of your whole project? The communication, well, who do you need to communicate to achieving your objectives? Because remember, your objectives will achieve your aim. And if I was in marketing and I had to do a bus back campaign, well, the bus back campaign is not just the bus back campaign. It's also determining what the message is. So what is the message that we want? And then it's also determining, well, I need to create the artwork. Well, we had an in-house artwork department, so I had to communicate to the sales director and to let them know what the message was, and to make sure it was consistent with the message of the product and the consistent feel and the message of the company in terms of what it was trying to communicate. So, you know, communication between different departments, the sales department, communication between the the creative artwork department, so I can communicate and give them the brief to come up so that they can create the artwork that would be produced. So then from that, the artwork will be then given to the printers would produce the posters, and then the posters would be given to the bus back depots to put on the back of their buses. So who else do I need to communicate to? I needed to communicate to the sales team, the agents and rep, and to do a presentation to them, to let them know what was happening. Had to communicate to the sales director, so he could go into the buyers of all these outlets, the Halfords, the B&Qs and Texas in Nottingham, to let them know what we were doing, so that they could order more stock, to let them know that we were doing an advertising campaign. And because we're doing an advertising campaign, then we actually need to they need to actually order more stock, because more people are going to be asking for the products. So, but also we need to communicate to administration, communicate to finance, to make sure that we have the finances available to do these advertising campaigns, to communicate to the administration department to let them know what's happening. So if people are now calling about this, then they can explain what's actually happening. So communication to different functional areas in your organization to different functional departments. The risk, well again, you need to talk about the risk. What's the risk involved? The risk involved in terms of the whole project. How damaging could it be to the reputation of your company if you don't actually communicate the right message? What is the risk in terms of the company? Well, the risk in terms of the company, in terms of Metro Products, was wasting these resources. We're spending all this money in terms of this campaign when this money could actually in fact be used elsewhere. But also the risk in terms of the amount of resources that's needed, the resources that's needed in terms of other time taken up from the sales director, administration, finance, accounts department, and all these other departments to combine and help marketing achieve this campaign, because it needed help from other departments in the company to actually make sure this was met. So again, you need to look at the risk and then the resources. What are the resources that are needed to actually achieve this? You need the finance department. You need maybe additional people. You need the resources of the sales director to go and tell his team and other buyers what's happening. You need the resources in terms of